doing a new series called Catherine Answer Questions, where I'm going to be asking my mum and dad different questions that I think are quite important. So I'll go for my dad's questions first. Okay. So first question is when we go out or / home, why do we make sure everything is safe and turned off?
Okay, so when we leave the boat, we make sure everything's turned off because we're not here, basically, and something could happen while we're not here, and something could go wrong. So you turn off your batteries and your electrics and things because they're all isolated then, and then nothing can really go wrong with them. Same with things like gas. If you were to have a gas leak or something was to go wrong and you're not here, you wouldn't know. So it's best to make sure everything's turned off when you leave, and then you know your boat's safe until next time.
When we go sailing, how do you keep warm?
Lots and lots of layers. That's the key. I also have as well, like thermal leggings. So just cheap thermal leggings from Amazon, which are just really, really good. So put them on, long sleeve top, nice thick quality jumper like this one, gloves, hat, fleece, coat, loads of layers.
Question 2 for my dad is, how do you know when there's a gas leak?
That's a good question. Well, you can buy things like gas detectors, so you can fit one of those to your boat, and that can be on so that when that obviously goes off, you've got a gas leak. But you can smell gas. So, if you were to smell gas on a boat, you obviously go and switch everything off straight away, ventilate the boat, open all the hatches, get the gas out, and then try and work out what it is. But you can smell gas.
We do have a detector for carbon monoxide, don't we? Which is slightly different.
Yeah, we have a detector for carbon monoxide, but we don't have a gas detector on board this boat.
Question 2 for my mum is, what would be your top tip to keep warm on a boat?
Dress appropriately. Loads of layers. Make sure we have 2 different types of heater, so we're quite lucky. We have our diesel heater on the boat, which keeps it really nice and warm, but we also have a little electric heater, so when we're using shore power we use a little 12-volt electric 240, yeah, something. It's a little electric heater that we use to keep us warm, which is quite nice. We also have a dehumidifier on that gives us a little bit of warmth, but one of the things I don't like is getting into a cold bed at night. So one of my top tips would be have a hot water bottle on your boat so you can put it into your bed before you get in to warm your feet up.
Question 3 for my dad is, when you're doing something with the sails, how do you know when there's too much strain on the mast or a rope?
Okay, so I suppose the easiest way to tell if there's a lot of strain, again, probably a couple of things to that one. First thing, if something's really hard to do, so if it's hard to winch something in, then chances are there's a lot of strain on that. So you'd have to have a look at that. Or if you're finding it difficult controlling the boat. So if you're out sailing and the boat's basically on its side, you've got too much sail up, so there will be a lot of stress and strain on things when that's happening. So it's best to put a bit of sail away and sail with less sail area out to try and ease the strain that's on these components. The only other thing that you have to be careful as well with winches is when you put your sail up. So the rope that you use to put your sail up, the halyard, if you can put too much tension on that as well, because again it goes back to a winch and you just start winding the winch and you can put a lot of pressure on that. So you have to be careful that when you look at your sails that they're not too tight or too slack. Again, that's a balance you have to try and find. So you don't want it that tight that it's literally trying to pull things out, but you don't want it too slack so that it's baggy and flapping. So it's a difficult one to answer that, but that's the things that I would look for.
Question 3 for my mum is, when you are seasick, what do you do to help it?
There's not really a lot you can do if you're already feeling sick. So my advice would be to make sure you're prepared before you go out on the boat. So to try and help not get seasick in the first place, make sure you've eaten, make sure you've had drinks, make sure you're at a good temperature, not too hot, not too cold. I wear sea bands, which are, they look a little bit like a sweatband. They go round your wrist and they've got like a hard little pressure point thing that goes on your wrist. I find that they help me, and I also have some seasick medication as well. I just use the Quells medicine for seasickness. If you do start feeling seasick, there's a few things that you can look out for. So obviously you start feeling a little bit queasy, but I find before I start feeling really sick that I can start to lose my balance a little bit. And sometimes, if anyone's ever had a migraine, before you have a migraine, sometimes you can get a little bit sort of confused, a little bit tired, and those are things that are quite common before I start feeling seasick. So just sort of struggle with naming certain things and suddenly feeling really, really tired. And then when I get to that point, the only thing really I can do is to lie down. And actually, one of the best places that I like to lie down is in the middle of the cockpit, out the back of the boat. Still in the fresh air, but it's nice and flat. So I quite like lying there. And then give it a couple of hours. At that point, if I am feeling really sick, I'll always take travel sick tablets to try and stop it. And I think the other thing as well is if you are prone to travel sickness, whether it's seasickness or just in the car, make sure you go to the toilet before you go anywhere as well. So I sometimes find that helps. And that's it really. It's not very pleasant, but you've got to let it run its course.
Question 4 for my dad is, why does the boat tilt on one side when we are sailing?
Okay, so that's because of the wind. So the wind's pushing on the sails, and that obviously tries to push the boat over. And as it pushes it over, it also pushes it forward at the same time. So when you're sailing along, you'll notice first that it kind of leans a bit, and then it kind of comes back a little bit, and it kind of finds that balance. And at the other end of the boat, at the bottom, there's obviously a big lead weight or a keel or whatever you've got down there, and that tries to counteract the force. So you've got to let that kind of run its course, and once you've got that balance right, you'll then be going forwards. So that's basically why they lean over, because the wind is putting that pressure onto the sails to try and make it go forwards, but it pushes it that way first.
Question 4 for my mum is, are some meals hard to cook?
So we've got an oven on this boat, which is great. So you can oven whatever you like. It's a gas oven. And I've also got a 2-burner on the stove. We don't have a microwave and we don't have a grill. So things like toast can be a little bit tricky. So that's it really. I think you just have to change your meals a little bit when you're out. First of all, you want good meals because you tend to get really hungry when you're sailing. And I also think as well, if you're out and it's quite cool, you want something warm to eat when you come in, and you want it quite quick. So, sort of chunky sort of soups and casseroles and things are always quite good.
Pasta.
Pasta's good, yeah. Sort of bolognese. I mean, we have like chilli and curry and that sort of stuff. All of that can be done in a pan. And it's nice and safe. Our oven's gimbaled as well, so that makes it a little bit easier if you are under passage and you're trying to cook something. But that would be my advice. And loads of snacks. Loads of snacks. It's not particularly all healthy snacks, I'm afraid. Yeah, cereal bars, sometimes some biscuits. Again, it depends if someone's feeling a bit rough. Then crackers or biscuits or
plain stuff, isn't it?
Crisps, or if you've got bread, I'll if I'm feeling particularly bad, I'll just have a piece of plain bread with nothing on. Those sort of things. So the stuff that you can grab. I do think that's one of the things that'll catch you out. Is feeling hungry, not having something to hand, and then you can obviously start feeling a little bit seasick, as well. So that's my advice.
Okay, question number 5 for my dad is, how do you know when the anchor is safe and secure and we won't drift?
There's a couple of things you can do to make this easier and so you can have a good night's sleep, basically, because that's always the time you start panicking, is at night. So the first thing I think to do is obviously set your anchor right. So whenever you're coming up to somewhere and you're going to stay the night, you drop your anchor down to the depth so that the anchor's touching the ground. So that's the first thing you've got to do. Then you let a little bit more chain out, and then you start to back away. And as you start to back away, you're laying the chain down like that. And that's what you've got to get. Get the anchor on the ground here, and your boat somewhere over here. So you need enough chain for it to be lying on the seabed, and then to come up like that. So once your anchor's down, you've got to reverse then. And as you reverse, that makes the anchor dig into the ground. So hopefully that's all gone correct, and your anchor's then set. The next thing to do is to basically keep an eye out. So you can do a visual check. So I'm alongside sort of whatever the land is, pick a few points and look at that. But there's apps and things things on your chart plotter. So you can set a track on your chart plotter, and hopefully that'll draw a lovely shape, a bit like a banana, on where you're swinging left and right, and loads of lines over the same line, so you know you haven't moved. Or there's things like there's I think something called Anchor Pro, which is one that we use on the phone, and again you can set a distance on that and say I want the alarm to go off if we move, say, 10 metres or 30 metres or whatever you want to set, depending on how busy the anchorage is. And that's always a good first thing. So that'll start going off straight away, and then obviously you'll get up and you can have a look at what's going on. But the best advice is to get the anchor set properly first. If the anchor's well dug in, you'll have a good night's sleep. Put plenty of chain out, make sure it's dug in, and that's it. You're pretty much set up.
I think one of the times that we've seen people get into trouble with anchoring is that they've anchored too close to another boat.
Definitely, yeah.
So they just get too close,
Yeah.
and you see them, and then when they don't set their own anchors properly, so therefore they either get tangled in somebody else's anchor chain because they basically drop their anchor on top of somebody else's anchor, and then it all gets all tangled up, and they end up taking themselves and another boat with them drifting off.
Yeah.
So we've seen that before. We've seen another one where basically they've anchored, but again the swing, as the wind has changed directions, basically pushed them into another boat because again they're just anchored far too close.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that people forget. And I think as well, people just rush, don't they?
They do rush.
They just
You've
come
got
in,
to-
they drop their anchor, and then that's it. And then they
Yeah.
just get on the back and they, start having their food or that sort of thing. And you can sit and you can sort of see people
boat
and you can
drifting
see
on.
the whole boat start to drift off and people are on the back of the boat completely oblivious. It's like, just give yourself 10 minutes or so at least to just check, right, are we actually where we need to be?
Yeah.
Go and check it, go and have another look and make sure there's the strain on the anchor or on the snubber. In our cases, we always use the
We do.
snubber.
Yeah,
So
you've got to do that as well.
And question 5 from my mum is, how do you keep things fresh? Because we don't have a freezer.
well, we've got a fridge. So we've got a fridge box. So it's not a fridge like a fridge you have at home. It's basically a box with a refrigerating plate in it. That keeps everything nice and cold. But the freezer stuff we just can't keep. So we can't keep, ice cream frozen or anything like that really. So if we're going to buy something that's frozen, I'll try and buy, maybe something that needs to be thawed out. So over Christmas we bought a gatto. That went in the fridge. It obviously defrosted overnight and it was ready to eat the next day, and that's absolutely fine. We buy some things for wraps and stuff. What I actually find is if you put it right next to the fridge plate, the food right next to the fridge plate, that will basically freeze as much of the food, but it's very, very hard to keep stuff frozen. So I try and position the food in the right place in the fridge as best as I can, but really we don't really buy that much frozen stuff because we just can't keep it that cold.
Okay, that's it. If you want me to ask one of your questions, put it in the comments below.